Hello and welcome to the Hands Up If You're Human podcast, an ongoing series of conversations dedicated to exploring and celebrating the messy reality of being human. The truth is there is nothing any of us can think, say, do or experience that isn't 100% human. So it's time to drop the shame and the guilt, accept everything that we are and start working to create the lives we really want to live. My name is Wyndham. I am the Blueprint Coach, and today I am joined by someone who spent nearly 20 years as a commissioned officer in the RAF. They were a tornado navigator and weapons system officer, a wing commander, a chief of staff of Tornado GR4 Force HQ. They were responsible for planning and delivering the incredible RAF Centenary Flypast in 2018, for which, along with other things, they were awarded an OBE. They are author of the book, the RAF Centenary Flypast, the story behind the event that marked 100 years of the Royal Air Force. They are a property investor. They are now a financial advisor. Last year, they ran 2,024 kilometers over the duration of the year, raising money for charity. And despite all of that, they are an incredibly humble human being. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the podcast, Kevin Gatland OBE. How are you, Kevin?
Well, thanks, Wyndham. Yeah, great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our chat today.
Good. I'm really looking forward to it as well. It's an interesting one because your background is such that it would be very easy to focus on the RAF and this incredible 20-year career you had. And I'm sure we will touch on it. But my first question is, what's missing from that list?
Oh, crikey. Family, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Family man, married, children, 2 girls at the moment, so I'm outnumbered. A third child on its way. Not sure, boy or girl yet. I wonder if I'm going to be further outnumbered or whether the balance righted a little bit more as time goes on. But yeah, I mean, it's been an incredible. When I look back 20 years and then the new business side of thing here, but I think you've captured the majority of it all there. Yeah, it's
brilliant. And congratulations on the existing family and obviously the expansion that is shortly to come. I know you've just moved house, and I know all these things are plates that are spinning. So thank you so much for sharing the time. As you know, the purpose of this season of the podcast is really around freedom. So I will ask you the question I start everybody with. What does finding your freedom mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because it means so much for so many people, and it's so different, I think, for so many people. So I think for me personally, when I think of freedom, there's sort of four main sort of quadrants, I guess, and it's sort of the spiritual side, the physical side, the mental health side, and the financial side. And I think if you've got a good balance in all of those quadrants, that enables you to align your purposes and goals, the things that you do, things you want to do on a daily basis. And however big those quadrants are, the spiritual side might be very small, the religious side might be very small, might be very big. The health thing, if you're young and fully fit, you might not even think about it, but as you get older, you tend to think about it more. So I think these quadrants change as time goes on. I think that's really interesting. And they're different in size and shape for different people. But I think if you've got all those different quadrants aligned, it enables you then to do those things that you want to do, which is what I think of as freedom. Like, how do you align what your goals, your objectives, your purposes to your everyday activities? I think once you've got that ticked in the box, that's a great place to be. And that for me is sort of the freedom side. It's all of those bits together.
Yeah, that's amazing. As soon as you said there are 4 quadrants, I thought, brilliant. There's going to be some really good stuff we can dig into.
Yeah.
What I think is really interesting is you have a blog post on your LinkedIn from that I'm going to take the title from and I'm going to use it on this episode. It's From Fast Jets to Finance.
Yeah.
And you talk in there about the creation of our lives and our perspective on the world. And as you were coming towards the end of your time in the RAF, you started thinking, well, what's next? And realizing there's this, the way I read it, it's that whole kind of, well, if it's created by us, then our lives can, and by us, I mean collectively, culturally, societally. If that's true, then the actual life we live rather than a cultural experience can be created by us.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's so I'll go back to when I first really started thinking about the sort of, I guess, the structure of what we live in, because I think that sets the scene for that question. So in 2015-16, I did a course with the military, which is with our defence staff college in Shrivenham, and a part of that was international relations, and it was the first time I'd sat down and thought about the construct of the world we live in,
Mm,
because it wasn't till only relatively recently that the idea of nation states and things like that, and the rules and the laws that we all come just to, I guess, accept and just live within, um, were kind of made apparent that the majority of it are man-made.
mm,
Until I think when you say it, you're like, well, that's obvious, isn't it? Of course it is. Like, well, it is until but if you've never thought about it, you've had reason to think about it, that, I think that then defines what you can do generally with life, what freedom sort of looks like. Um, and then of course, once you think, well, if man had made all of these different things, then they can be changed at any point in the future. And therefore the definition of some of that into one's own life, if you look at that with the same sort of lens and say, actually, most of the time that we're thinking about what we do with our life and how we live it are defined by all these other exterior rules and regulations and beliefs and mindsets and impositions. And if you can get beyond that, and that's not an easy job to do either, like get beyond those, I think you end up then potentially looking at the whole way of living is like, why do I need to live? I don't know. Why do I need to live in a house? Like,
yeah.
why not live in something else? Like, well, I suppose just because people do. Like, but why? And then you see some people go off and do really wacky, cool things with lives and their lives, and you think, wow, that's out of the box.
Mm.
And I think that's because they've expanded outside of the normal sort of way of living, and that's incredible. I think that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Was that something you had to unlearn, the kind of condition prescribed, well, this is where the walls are, that because I've been told this is where the walls are? Or was it, as you mentioned that you'd never really thought about it, was it obvious as soon as you looked at it? Or did you have to work to
Yeah.
get there?
Yeah, no, I think it was obvious as soon as I was a lecturer, you're standing up and talking about the Treaty of Westphalia, I think it was, where the nation states were all first sort of put together. And you think, well, what was before that? A bunch of warlords controlling various tracts of land, and there's always been some kind of level of hierarchy, but it's been quite interesting in terms of thinking about, well, just because there is now, what doesn't necessarily need to be in the future. So I think there's a degree of unlearning because that's just the way it is, isn't it? It's just the
Mm.
way of the world, and you never really think or have cause or meaning necessarily to think about any other way. Um, so there is a degree of unlearning. There is a degree of experiencing different things, which I think travel is fantastic for that, isn't it? You can go to different countries, see different things, and you get all these immersive experiences, different cultures, and you see that people do live differently to, say, the UK or the US or the Western society, and there's some really amazing things that happen around the rest of the world. But until you experience that, you don't really know any different. So the unlearning comes, I guess, after an experience of some sort.
Yeah. And that's really interesting as well, isn't it? Because I work with a lot of people around what do we really want?
Mm.
So I'll be interested in your take on this because it's very easy to get caught up in there. Well, of course you go off and buy a house because that's what everybody does. And certainly over here, over the last 40 years, that has been the narrative. It's like work really hard, buy a property because that's what you do. And then with the property market, it's then well, not only do you buy a house, but it's a way to make money and secure your future and all those kind of things. Of course, you want to go and buy the nice car, and of course, you want to do this, that, and the other. Swanky holidays, nice restaurants. And I remember I bought into that completely because I've never challenged it. But as you
Mm.
say, if you travel to other places in the world, then, well, you can go to places where you go, well, then that's not on their list of things that they want. And I have firm belief that we as human beings are fundamentally the same
Mm.
everywhere we go, right at our core. It's just those kind of outer shells, the dynamics of the conditioning we have and the rules we've been given that completely distort that kind of first visual we get on
Yeah.
any person or culture. So I think you're absolutely right. I think it's absolutely um, something we can change.
Mm.
Any thoughts on that before I move on? Because I do have another question, but you may well have.
Yeah, I just think and there's no right or wrong, and I think
Yeah,
that's the really interesting bit. Is there's this sometimes there's a perception is there. Well, I'm doing it differently, or I would like to do this, and it's wrong, and then we kind of question like why is it wrong? Well, it feels wrong because it's going against the norm. Like, yeah, but the norm isn't always the best way,
yeah,
as businesses often find out, don't they? CEO of a business gets replaced, and suddenly the direction changes, and whether it's the culture, whether it's the profitability, whether it's some other metric that's being measured, can be completely altered just by a change. And then people, after a year or 6 months or maybe even a month, kind of go, well, this is a better way of doing it. I've never really thought about doing it this way. I think it just there's a degree of courage in there, isn't there?
yeah.
And and just kind of going for it and accepting that you might have some detractors as well if you do change the path quite a lot.
Yeah, I think that acceptance is such a difficult thing to do, especially when you're engaging in what you're talking about, which is actually I'm part of a group that is all broadly going in the same direction.
Mm.
But something about my life has happened that means actually I think I'm going to go off in a different direction. There is a fear of judgment, and there will be some levels of judgment from certain people. And it is recognizing that, taking us back to the beginning, that you're talking about purpose and goals,
Mm.
that those are individual. Unless we are, do I mean unless? I think they become collective until we start thinking about them. And then we realize, oh shit,
Mm.
I don't actually care about that thing that I've been pursuing. Or you get to a point in your life where you've accumulated the status and the wealth and the whatever, and you're still sat there going, this doesn't feel how I thought it would feel.
Yep.
And I think those big life events, some of them can be imposed on us, some of them are created by us. I know you have not had a super smooth, you could look at that list of your achievements I gave at the beginning, and you could, on meeting you, you are this humble, this is meant as a massive compliment, gentle feeling human being.
Yeah.
It would be very easy to think this guy's just sailed through life. But I know there have been periods in your life where that has not been the case.
Mm.
I know you're happy to talk about this, so I'm going to ask you were married
Mm.
originally to somebody else,
Yep.
and sadly and tragically they died. Talk to me about what happened for you personally, for your family, because I know you had a daughter at the time as well,
Mm.
and how that impacted this idea of freedom and purpose and goals and things like that.
Yeah. So I've been married a few years, and Marie was my daughter. She was 2.5, and I was actually away during that period. We were still within the military on doing this, defence course, this year-long sort of degree course. During the period of that time, my wife was diagnosed with a brain tumour, grade 4 glioblastoma. It's incurable. There is only one exit at that point for the vast, 99% of people. That wasn't long. That was 6 months from sort of diagnosis to her passing away. And I think that the difference there is that it really did. I mean, we were mid-30s at that point. It wasn't. You assume these things don't happen to other people, don't you? And you assume things like that happen to older people. And of course, they don't. I think then it really focuses your mind about what's important in life. What actually do you want to do with your days and your weeks and your months and your years? Because we all assume we're going to last kind of forever. No one really, really want to think about it, do you? But of course, then something like that happens, and you think, crikey, actually, you just don't know. So for me, the freedom element of it wasn't necessarily thinking I need to leave the Air Force because I need to be freer. Because what was interesting about that, and we can come back to this point if you want later on, was that despite being in a fairly regimented sort of organization for the military, I actually felt pretty free, doing what I wanted to do. And enjoying what I was doing. But it did sort of make me look at, okay, well, what is the next 20 years going to look like? How actually do I develop the best and the best and stable life for my young family at that point. It was a really challenging time, and of course it did sort of make you question a lot of those four quadrants. Like, actually, how do you maximize your own health so that you can continue having the freedoms later in life? How do you manage your own financial freedom or financial position to maximize the future opportunities so you can lead a freer life, I suppose. Very questioning, you spend a lot of time questioning, don't you, the spiritual stroke religious side of life when something like that happens. And just sort of managing, I guess the fourth quadrant, to bring that one in, sort of the mental fitness side of stuff. It's you kind of just have to keep getting on. Just focus on the future and accept that the past is, that's pretty horrible. But there isn't really a choice. You kind of have to, especially when you've got a 2.5, 3-year-old to be bringing up as well. So yeah, it certainly made you question an awful lot of what life was like, and then what the route forward is going to be.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That you covered so much in that, and I'm really interested in this freedom you felt you had within the RAF, which we think of the armed services or the military as extremely regimented. There is no freedom because you do what you're told to do. If we can put a pin in that, because I do want to come back to it, but you spoke about two things that really interest me. One was the maximizing of future opportunities, both around health and finance. So I'm interested in how you approached that, because maximize future opportunities doesn't mean anything, really. Or rather, it does, but I see it so much, certainly with fitness. When we set fitness goals, they're anchored too close to the surface. And they are as, well, I want to be as fit as I can be for as long as I can be. And my question is always, why?
Yeah.
What does that enable? What does that empower you to do? And also with the mental side of things, you have to keep getting on, you said, and you have to, in this path of acceptance. I'd be fascinated on both of those to understand a little bit more about the process you went through, because like I said, I think it's really easy to look at people and think they've got it all figured out. And it's just not true. They arrive at a place where they might have figured it out, but there's been this tumultuous process to get there. So would you mind talking a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So I'll touch on a couple of bits almost that bounce around that quadrant, I suppose, just my own mind, just to keep like financially, I think very quickly. So we stupidly, crikey, I'm a financial advisor now. We hadn't got any life insurance sorted out. We have been talking about it for the previous 6 to 9 months before the diagnosis, about we really should get this life insurance thing sorted out, shouldn't we? I'd sort of felt fairly comfortable. It's like, well, if I pass away, my military pension will pay out a death in service sum, there'll be an income coming in. So we sort of felt like, well, there's something there should the worst happen to me. There was nothing there on the other side, which was just stupid, quite frankly. I mean, it was really silly not to have just gone, let's just get that bit sorted out. Because it then meant, well, I've still got the mortgage to pay, and I'm now trying to juggle like working full time. The military were brilliant. I mean, absolutely brilliant in terms of the flexibility they offered and the support they give. I couldn't fault my leadership chain, and I couldn't fault the organisation, in any way, shape, or form. But it kind of left me with, well, I still need to do this thing. I still need to do some form of work to continue paying the mortgage. So, like, in terms of the freedom that I didn't put in place for myself, well, that was it. Because you're still effectively tied to a mortgage. That sort of briefly covers the finance side. In terms of the mental side of it, I think, like, I always make a delineation between, like, there's mental health and mental fitness, and like, I rightly or wrongly, the mental health bit is I think an area where you pretty much need professional help to get through that bit, whatever that bit is, and where the lines cross over is obviously different for everyone. The mental fitness, the fitness side of stuff is like, that's just dealing with like day to day, just bad stuff, good stuff, you know, and I think trying to preserve the mental fitness through close connections, relationships, friends, family, and having a support network around you is incredibly important. And I think we probably don't value it as much, certainly as blokes, right? I just don't think we put as much effort into maintaining, you know, good relationships as typically, you know, women do.
Yeah.
Tend to be much better at it. And, you know, I don't want to generalize too much, but I am, you know.
Yeah.
I look at how, you know, my female friend, girlfriend, you know, wife, how she sort of um, manages all her personal relations. I think, wow, that's such a better support structure than we've ever got in place. And I think that's really, really important to maintaining. You know, if you're going to come back to those four quadrants and say, I need to be ideally strong in all four of those. How do you do that for that one? Like, well, it's people. And there was a study done of like 90-year-olds and who just before they were due to pass away, they're like, what's the most important thing to you? And they were talking about friendships and relationships and wishing they put much more effort into doing those. And I think we're just destined to learn the same lessons over and over again because it's difficult to do, especially when life's busy, kids, work, blah, 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 you know. But I think that kind of hits at retirement as well, and especially if you retire early because you're hitting your financial goals. And that's another interesting one. What are you going to do when everyone else is still working and you're now retired? Like, unless you've got a proper plan about how you're going to use your time, I think that's quite a difficult one. Yeah, I think I've covered off.
Yeah. I think it's it is a fascinating. It's always fascinating to talk to anybody about it, especially somebody who has been through a huge life experience that has prompted them to reassess, and however that reassessment happens. And you talking about that mental fitness piece, it's got me thinking. I'm awful at genuinely keeping in touch with my friends, to the point where when I have been on the phone to one of them, my wife is there saying to me, "Who was that? What happened? You were on the phone talking to somebody for a period of time."
Yeah.
Because we don't do it. It's kind of like piss takey texts,
Yeah.
and then you kind of go, "Well, I'll get back to that," and you never do. So
Yeah.
it's a really interesting one, and I think you're 100% right. It's interesting, the delineation between mental health and mental fitness as well. Can I assume from your delineation that you had professional help on the mental health side after your wife died, or was that something actually
No,
you didn't feel the need
no,
for?
I didn't feel the need, to be honest. I mean, I feel I've been very fortunate. I've never really sort of struggled like in that way, or felt the need to speak to people. Equally, I'm quite happy to, as like we are here, I'm quite happy talking about stuff to people. You know, in the military, you know, there's a great camaraderie. You build up incredibly close and strong bonds with people. So, and I think that's how people that have gone to very stressful places and you know, yeah, we spent a lot of time abroad, but our stress levels were way lower than soldiers on the ground in Kandahar, in Afghanistan, in Helmand province or whatever it was. I mean, crikey, they're dealing with, you know, horrendous things you kind of never want to experience or really even know about. And they, to a degree, are able to get through it because the camaraderie, the bond, the shared experience of how shit it was, quite frankly, binds you together and allows you to have a bit of an outlet. Now, I'm not saying that's the only thing, like, oh, it's fine, as long as you can talk about it, it's all going to be easy. Like, not at all. But I think that's why you kind of sometimes get the dark humor. And I think you see that with, you know, paramedics, you see it with the fire service, you see it with the military and police, and, you know, some of those where you've actually got to deal with some really, really horrible things. Having that shared experience is pretty vital, I think, to be able to deal with it like mentally and be able to sort of say to someone, I've had a really crap couple of days. I'm feeling really rubbish about this, and just talking it through and feeling like it's okay. We're human. Like that really early point you made, like we are human. We have the human condition. We sort of deal with ourselves and our emotions and know that it's okay to be able to have that. And I think that's where, you know, was it male suicide is much higher, isn't it, than female suicide? Is that, you know, I'm not a psychologist, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's a big part of it as well. So
Yeah.
The people you surround yourself with, the structure that you have, the camaraderie, the friendship groups, I think is really important.
Yeah. You saying that reminded me that kind of having a sense of humor that can tiptoe into the dark side,
Yeah.
I think is just part of, it's certainly my take on being British. and dealing with stuff. I can't speak for any other nationality, but I
Yeah.
remember when my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2016. She's absolutely fine now. But we got the diagnosis, and on the car journey home, we only lived 3 minutes away, 4 minutes away from the hospital. We got to the end of the road where the hospital was, and we'd been in silence, and I turned to her and said, "Too soon to make a joke?" And she said, "No." And I said, "I'm gonna have to run a fucking marathon now, aren't I?" Like as a fundraiser. And it was just the thing we needed to break the tension of the terrible news.
Yeah.
And once we'd done that, it was like, okay, what do we need to do? What are we going to do? It just kind of breaks that, as I say, breaks the tension so you can deal with the thing.
Yeah. And I think that's why comedy is so valuable. Like you look at some comedians and they're right on the edge. And the reason I heard recently is like they get the laugh because actually they know that everyone's thinking the same thing. Can't say it, and there's a degree of okay, that little elephant's been brought out and openly discussed, and people are kind of they recognize the situation or the thing, because otherwise it wouldn't be particularly funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it can be seen as sort of callous humor, but actually in context of what's happened, it's a way that we deal with it, isn't it? And it's a way we're able to try and keep the mental fitness dial in the right quadrant. We all go through periods of being really happy, really sad, really cross, really, whatever, all the different emotions are all there at different levels across different periods of time. But important that people are able to deal with the really negative stuff, and it not transition to be a struggling with the mental fitness side, tripping over into actually becoming a proper mental health issue that needs then professional attention.
Yeah, I heard somebody say, if you don't talk it out, you will act it out. And just that kind of, just the release of putting something into words outside of ourselves stops it just tramping around in our head on our own. Yeah. And if we do keep it in there, then the tension and the stress and the discomfort all builds and will manifest in our bodies in some way. And then we're dealing with all of that as well as the thing we need to deal with. Really interesting. I want to go back to your freedom within the RAF.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, because I had a big emotional low point around about 40, because it was 20 years into a career I hated, but I felt trapped. And every time I couldn't, or I failed to resolve it, I lost a bit more confidence, and it just became this vicious circle. So you spent 20 years in the RAF. And I saw on your LinkedIn prior to that, you worked as an insurance underwriter for 10 months. What I'm interested in a couple of things, really. One is, what was the decision-making process to join? What were you looking for? And then talk about the freedom within that job, because from outside in, it looks there wouldn't be freedom because you're doing what you're told.
Yeah, totally. And I think actually it kind of comes to the hub of like, what does freedom mean? So the first one, I mean, I'd always just been interested in flying aeroplanes, and ever since a relatively young sort of teenager, I suppose. It just looked like a fascinating career. I had this nostalgic view as well of the Air Force in the from the 1940s.
Battle of Britain and all that kind of stuff.
Crikey, the amount of times I watched that film is unbelievable. Humming the theme tune in my head right now. It was one of those things that I just thought, that just looks so cool. That looks so much fun. And why wouldn't I want to do something that is just really fun? And it was then like, do I go commercial and all that, or do you go in the military? And it kind of like the military one out, it's like, that's paid for. That one's really expensive to do. And the opportunity would have been, you could end up flying fast jets. That's pretty amazing. Or you end up flying an airliner. For me at that point, it was definitely the fast jet route. And I think, and then the insurance underwriting job was interim between finishing.
Okay.
Was like, I need something just to, I just couldn't sit around and do nothing.
So it wasn't that you spent 10 months in a job you could project forward thinking, oh my God, I'm not doing this for another 40 years. I'm going to go do something completely different. It was going to do the flying. But intake is in 10 month.
And of course, when I started that job, I had no idea whether I was going to be in or out, or I mean, there was a 3-4 3-day selection process that you kind of went through. And at some point in the future, they said, yeah, well done, you've been accepted into. Of course, that process could go on for years, stroke never happen. So I needed something that was going to be sort of the job. And because I was so dead set on that, I kind of didn't really care what the other side job, which was probably a bit of an error, because I probably should have selected something that I thought that I definitely want to stay within this if that doesn't work. But I think from memory, I just kind of selected anything that.
And it worked out, right?
And it worked out. I was really, really lucky, really fortunate just to kind of get in. And then the freedom, I think, within it kind of comes back to if you can define your own goals and your own aspirations, the thing you want to achieve, and then you can spend every day doing it, like that, is that not freedom? Like how else would you, for me at that point, I was 18 and a half when I started the RAF. I was 20, I think it's something like that when I first started flying around in the back of a Tornado, 2021, something like that. That was just ultimate freedom. Yeah, we operated within a defined set of rules and regulations that were very stringent and all the rest of it. But it was the best job in the world, especially for like somebody who's 21 or whatever. And so therefore it kind of, when reflecting about the question of what does freedom mean, it was like actually it is aligning what you do on an everyday basis to your goals and aspirations. Like my goal and aspiration was just want to do that. I don't want to do anything else. Now, as time goes on, things change, don't they? Because that's great when you're a young singly. And I've always said that was wonderful in your 20s. I had no real ties, no commitments, no family, no children. My first tour, I think in one of the years when I was on 12 Squadron, I think I spent, it felt like no more than about 4 or 5, 6 weeks at home at any one point before there was the next detachment to go on to, the next training exercise, the next deployment or whatever it may be. But every single one of those was an incredible experience, and I really enjoyed them. So I never felt sort of trapped by the regime because it was doing the thing that I wanted to do anyway. As time kind of goes on, those, what does freedom mean? How does it morph into something different? Well, it changes because the exterior pressures on you, and you mature as well. I look back, someone said, do you want to go and do that again now? But like, no, thanks. I'm done. I've enjoyed that. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that today? No, not at all. Even if you're single and all the rest didn't have your children, no, I'm done. My freedom values have changed now to what they were then. And of course, the exterior pressures I mentioned, family come along, children come along, other things happen. And so it starts feeling different, especially when, say 2016 happened, wife passed away. And then I'm like, I can't do the whole 6 months abroad thing or 9 months or whatever we end up sort of going to. My freedom has to, the freedom thing, like the goals and aspirations thing, has completely changed. Like I've got it. This is what I want to do, and this is now how I want to change things. So it does change through life, and that's and whether that's driven by a big exterior punch in the gut like that was, or something that is just a bit more subtle, I think that's okay as well. Like it's quite unusual that in my teenage years I knew exactly what I wanted to do. But it's fine if you don't know what you want to do until you, I don't know, much later on. That's okay as well. Just gather experiences, I suppose. But that's a long way around of answering your question.
No, it's a great way around, and a couple of amazing quotes. If you can define your own goals and what you want to achieve, isn't that freedom? And then spend every day pursuing it, isn't that freedom? That's brilliant. And the fact that you said your freedom values change, I think is such an important thing to recognize. And what I think your story, certainly what I take from your story, is that, like you say, you're quite unusual insofar as in your teenage years you had a very clear idea of what you wanted to do, and you pursued it. And your plan B was not thought through.
Yeah.
There was no plan B. It was like, well, I'm going to go and get this job. I don't care what it is, pretty much. But when this thing happened in your life, this massive life event happened, and you were in fast jets at the time. Yeah. So what happened there? Was that you going to the RAF and saying, this doesn't work for me now because of everything? Or was it just the environment? Did they say, what do you want to do, Kevin?
Yeah. So I sort of moved off of the flying side in 2015, I think, and then started this degree course in 2015,
Oh,
in
yes,
this academic year, September through to June, I think it was. Um, and then after that, because of that, I was living up just north of Cambridge at the time. I was then able to sort of request, could I go to RF Marham, which was the base closest to that. It kept me within the Tornado force, which was good, and that's how I ended up sort of joining the force headquarters as chief of staff, because it gave me a job that enabled me to commute. There's a cracking little nursery just opposite the base, so I could, those things, the stars aligned in terms of actually I could do that, could do all the little and stuff, nursery in the morning, drop her off at 8:30, 9 o'clock, whatever it was, get to the force headquarters. I wasn't flying, so that's good. I was never going to be going away. And it kind of just so happened that my option point to leave was within sort of 2 to 3 years. So I left the Air Force in what turned out to be about April 2019. And that would have been the time that I might have left anyway, regardless.
Right.
I just needed to keep it going for that sort of 2-3 years, which again was facilitated incredibly well through my chain of command, through the military. So it's very.
So just quickly there, that you had to keep it going for 2 or 3 years. Why was that?
I think because I still enjoyed what I was doing. It was still, even though I wasn't flying at that point, I was still within the setup of something that's very familiar. The headquarters job was a new challenge, which was superb. Everyone that was there, I kind of knew, or I'd known over the last 10, 15 years, lots of familiar faces. And within the military, you don't necessarily apply for a job and interview for it. There's a bunch of jobs that come up at different times, and basically your careers officer poster, as we call them, sort of just would say, right, there's a slot there. You might have 2 or 3 slots available. Which one of those do you want? And it just so happened that one came up, and they would say, okay, we can move you into that. You're qualified for this job at that rank, and that's absolutely fine. It was then a natural point to say, well, if I've got something that works for me really well for the next, because they're sort of 2-3 year tours at that point, if that works well for me and my family as it was at that point, then I might as well stick with it, because at my option point is when you can leave, and it's kind of like the end of your contract, although it's extendable for as long as you want. And it was super useful because things like a pension was payable from that point as well. So really useful for me, and fortunate that I was able to stay and do that. Would I have left earlier? Probably not. I think some of it is just letting your life settle down after something like that. It's so whenever there's a big event, I think it's worth just take some time, just take some time to breathe and allow kind of all the emotional stuff to just settle a bit. Even if it feels like you're just like, come on, I need to move forward, and if you're like, yeah, you may well do, but it might be better just to redefine, like, what does life mean again? What does, and who knows? I mean, that's a really, really tricky time.
Yeah, I think that's one of the curses of our current time, is the constant pressure to be in action.
Yeah.
Especially as a coach, I spend time, actually the only way we create change is through action.
Yeah.
And it's really important to understand what that action is in service to. Like you were talking about those 4 quadrants, spirituality, physically, mentally, and financially.
Yeah.
Well, what is that action going to achieve? How deeply have you thought about what it is you're trying to create, or what you want to attract?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than a busy fool who's just firing off to be busy. And actually, you're right. There might be times when you just need to be busy. That's okay.
Yeah.
But there also might be times when take a big pause, take a big breath, and do this difficult work of figuring out what you want that next phase of your life to look like.
Yeah, and I think was it Stephen Covey came up with this concept of you could be climbing up climbing up this ladder, but if it's leaning against the wrong wall, what's the point? And I think it's taking time to like angle your ladder, and you might get up halfway and then kind of go, no, bugger, this is wrong. Then you go, okay, come back. But I think it's that busy is running up the ladder, and it's just getting it, trying to. I mean, this is, it's easy to say, really difficult to do, isn't it? But it's trying to lean your ladder against the right wall to begin with, so that every step, every piece of progress that you're going to make is aligned to what your future self is going to be proud of looking back and go, I'm glad that you did X. I'm glad that we did. I'm glad you decided to start the business. I'm glad you decided to leave that job. I'm glad that you and your wife or husband decided to have another child. Whatever it is, whatever that thing is that's going to make life enjoyable and fun and be positive. It's worth trying to take some time just to work that through. It's not easy. Not easy.
No, I completely agree. And it's almost like, we put in all this effort and get to a point, and then there's a little plateau, and you see it in everything. Did you see the I can't remember his name, the hardest runner, or the guy who ran the length of Africa?
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. Well, I saw him. He finished just before last year's London Marathon, and he ran the London Marathon. And he's interviewed by this young reporter ahead of the London Marathon, and he's literally just finished running the length of Africa. And their question to him was, "What's next?" And it's like, give him 5 minutes to put his feet up and figure out what he wants to do. But I think we're trapped in that. It's the idea of resting, of reassessing, of allowing things to sink in, resonate in the body, and help guide the next ladder, the next wall, the next mountain, the next whatever it might be. I think is such an important phase of or multiple phases of our lives as we start shifting, and as you said, the freedom values change. And even if you start climbing the ladder against the right wall, you might get halfway and realize freedom values have changed. It's not wasted time. What would be wasted time is continuing up that ladder that you've changed your perspective on.
It kind of comes back to that whole, like, I guess business is like fail fast type of mentality that I've heard, read quite a lot about. Is just go do it, just start it, just get on with it. And if it goes wrong, then it kind of goes wrong. But then it's the next bit of it is, do you just quit at that point, or do you just keep going? And that's the next question. It's all well and good saying I'm just going to start it and but you kind of do need a bit of a plan, and you do need to understand where your success metric lies, within the business. Like, am I on the right trajectory, or am I now not? And I think that's incredibly difficult to know and to define. And that's where external coaches, external business coaches, kind of giving a third perspective or second perspective on a business is really, really valuable, because they can see stuff. Like, you're blind to it, but you can see stuff, can't you, looking in to these sort of things.
Fascinating. What is something you find yourself having to consistently or repeatedly free yourself from?
I think some of it comes down to the 80-20 rule. So, like 80% of your success is driven by 20% of the things you do, and I think it's not worrying too much about the last 20%. I wouldn't say then that's not to say I'm a perfectionist in nature. People go for job interviews. Oh, what's your biggest weakness? Oh, I'm a perfectionist. Like, no. Okay, I'm not a perfectionist, but I definitely probably spend more time in that bit than I probably ideally should do.
In that final 20%.
In the final 20%, to try and again, it ends up being like, you're going to squeeze a bit of extra value out of whatever you're doing, but is that worth that? Because how does that then align to, say, what your original goals and aspirations were? Like, is it going to move the needle that much? So I generally like neatness and tidiness, and when I'm putting documents together for people, and it's just like, I probably spend just too much time, like, just like, is this perfect? Is this exactly what? No, I don't like that sentence. Like, oh God, it doesn't matter. People don't read half these things anyway, but like, no, I'm going to make And I think I probably spend a bit too much time doing that bit. But then it's kind of rewarding because the flip side of it is you go, it's a really good document. I'm busy.
Yeah.
All the I's are dotted and T's are crossed and all that sort of stuff. So I think that side is definitely an area that but I sort of equally, I kind of go, that's just a bit of my personality. And I think it's been dragged through all the way through the Air Force stuff, all the way from day one, the Air Force. It's all about like, how do you just keep getting better? How do you keep improving? How do you keep professionalism levels at the highest possible level? Because it was always about that. We'd fly for an hour and a half. We would spend 3 hours planning that trip, going through the defining the aims and objectives of that sortie. You'd spend 45 minutes, say, briefing the sortie, so everyone within information knew exactly what their aircraft was doing, their formation within maybe a package of other aircraft as well. You then fly the trip, it'd all be recorded. You might spend a few hours, debriefing what had gone on. And you go all the way back to the beginning, like, did we achieve the aims and objectives? Tick or cross, like, and even if you'd achieved them, like, well, how did we? Was it the optimal way of doing it? What process did we go through? So you talk about the briefing, through the planning phase, like what was good in the planning phase? What errors did we make? The maps have come out and they've got this on them. Like, why is that there? Did everyone leave the brief understanding what they needed to do? Anyone have any problems during startup taxi takeoff? Any problems with the jet that we can all learn about, or we completely buggered up the departure plan, which meant someone got airborne before the other one, or they weren't in the right place, whatever it was. The air exercise itself, the medium level portion, the low level portion, the any diversions, all those bits, and then you almost end up debriefing the debrief. Like, right, is there anything else we've learned out that we come out of this? Top three, and you four different color pens, because apparently that's a good way of learning. And you take all those lessons. We did that pretty much every single time we flew. So you end up in that sort of constant like professionalism cycle of like, I'm going to take some lessons away from that bit, but it does mean then you end up focusing quite a lot.
Yeah.
Which is why you tried to go, what are the top 3 lessons that kind of came out of this? Because we talked about 100 things, but your brain can only remember a little bit.
And if you're looking at incremental improvement, because the base standard is pretty high, then you don't need 100. You can list 100, but like you say, you can only ever really take away and work on 1 to 3, as you say. And have you taken that into all areas of your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because after client meetings now, I'll often sit and just take a few minutes. I won't formalize it as like we did before with, don't I don't have a whiteboard in my office and then start giving myself a full. But there are times you walk out of a client meeting and go, that didn't kind of go the way I thought it was going to go. Like, what was it about that meeting? Was it the way I approached something? Was it my understanding or their understanding that I couldn't articulate well enough? So they kind of left going, and it's fascinating when you kind of go back through and think, what did I say at that point? Or how should I have prepared better so that my client was in a better position for that meeting? What could I have done differently? Because at the end of it, you kind of want the best possible meeting for them as well as me as a business. But ultimately, like, the aim and objective now with my financial planning meetings, like, so you can get the best out of like all this stuff you've got to achieve the things that your goals and objectives, like to achieve those things you've got. So I use the process of like, the pre-meeting bit, the during the meeting bit, and then have a think about, okay, what actually should I have done better? Not every time, life busy, things get in the way, but certainly a good majority of meetings I'll have that process, and I need to write down a few notes, and then I will do as well. So it's been useful. It's been really useful doing that. It does take a bit of discipline just to not forget and but it's kind of inbuilt over the last 20 years, I guess. So
what I find really interesting is, certainly from my own perspective, I spent a huge amount of my life afraid of what I perceived as failure. And what came with that was a whole load of stories that either prevented action in the first place or berated failure after the fact. And what I'm hearing from you actually is, what can I learn? That failure is not a thing. I mean, it is in the kind of, did we achieve our objectives? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay, so we could say we failed if we didn't. And the key focus is, what do we learn from this so that next time we are better equipped to succeed where in whatever it is we've set ourselves out to do, which is a completely different, one's a beat down mindset and the other is well, we can always get better. How do we do that?
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is, during our time flying, we were expected to self-analyze. Like, you expected to have the kind of capacity, awareness, and honesty and integrity to bring forward stuff you would learn. Not because it's like, great, now I can whip you into shape and aren't you rubbish, but actually someone else might learn that exact same thing. Now, but generally we're pretty rubbish at learning other people's lessons, but just sometimes you pick up something and go, right, I'm not going to do that. I've learned from them and what they did today, and that's something, oh, that's a better way of doing it. Oh, I didn't realize the kit, the nav kit, the the weapon system or whatever it is, the radar. I didn't realize it worked like that. That's brilliant. That's something that I've learned. And if you didn't pick up that, it was kind of on the tape, and then your instructor or whatever would be like, "Why have you not picked that up? Are you either avoiding it because you're hoping to get away with it? Well, that's not good for your integrity, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with bombs, missiles, guns, people's lives, etc., etc. So that's not kind of cool. Or you were so maxed and busy that you just didn't have the capacity. It's like, okay, well, what can we do to alter the workload within the cockpit? Like, how do we stop you being so busy? Because there's this phenomenon where if someone's, you see it with junior pilots, for example, they're flying, and you'll be talking to them and nothing is going in. They are so busy, the brain's at 100% capacity, just flying the aircraft through bad weather or whatever, that they're just not listening. Like, you miss these air traffic calls. Why was this? You missed your backseater as we were, talking to you about X, Y, and Z, like what happened there. And of course, there's safety issues as well. So it's trying to get to the nub of the issue. Like, what's the core problem? What's caused that? Because we can all learn from these things, and that's really, really vital.
Yeah, it sounds an awful lot like, and I'm not surprised. There's lots of stories of the military that this is a core element of it, is ownership and responsibility and agency in your part. Nobody's asking you to control the uncontrollable.
Yeah.
But you are being asked to control the controllable, which is your input.
Yeah.
And being honest and open and, gosh, I'm struggling here, completely overwhelmed at this point. And as you say, is that because this is new and you're having to upskill so quickly that you've got no spare capacity? Or are we overloading you? And yes, you're overloaded, but can you free up capacity through repetition, through an advancement in your skills? In which case, okay, we don't need to change the process. We just need to give you time to upskill.
That's it.
And I think that's true in life.
It is.
It's so easy to just be overwhelmed. And anytime you do anything new, if you're not overwhelmed, it's not really new.
Yeah.
And so giving yourself that recognition, I'm not overwhelmed because I'm an idiot. I'm overwhelmed because this is new.
Yeah.
And I don't have capacity because I'm learning.
Yeah.
And being honest with taking agency, taking control, being transparent and say, actually, I'm not progressing at the pace I thought I would. Why is that? Is it because I don't care?
Yeah.
In which case I'm against the wrong wall.
Yeah.
Is it because, I'm not quite cut out for this thing? In which case, is there something else adjacent to this that will still allow me to pursue my goals and my purpose and all those kind of things? I think it is a brilliant analogy. I've been watching the Channel 4, is it Top Gun Inside the RAF?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I saw the last episode and their final training for the final Typhoon qualification, and the pilot is just like, I didn't hear exactly what you've just said. I didn't hear my instructor talking because I was too busy looking for the target I was supposed to be locking onto. And it's just those accepting the overwhelm and learning where you can.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And I think, when it comes to that capacity thing, and this isn't just mental capacity, I suppose. It's just like, how you're going to forge forward in whatever you want to be doing. That for me is like, capacity equals knowledge times experience. And I think that's again when you're thinking about how do I define my future life? What am I going to do? There's an element of like you're just going to have to get knowledgeable about whatever it is. But it's about building a business. You're going to have to get knowledgeable about all those different facets of the business because you might not have the experience, but if your knowledge levels are quite high, you've got the capacity to deal with stuff. If you're struggling just on the basic knowledge of anything, and your experience levels are low, like life's really hard at that point to do and everyone starts in that, but that then comes down to, well, if that bit is really important to develop a business, then you're going to have to grow your knowledge base because you don't have the experience yet. After 10 years or whatever it is, you can rely on your experience and rely on all those, sort of, this just doesn't feel right type of thing. And yeah, your knowledge is also going to be big, but when things change, you're able to deal with that a little better through that sort of broad idea of an equation that sort of aligns to it. But then it kind of comes back to like setting your goals. Like what do you actually really want to do this? Like is this going to give you the freedom within life that you're aiming for? It doesn't mean like freedom to go sit on a beach in Cancun with a mojito, because after 2 weeks, guarantee you'll be bored. But it's like aligning those things to enjoy the life you're going to do, because actually you're going to spend a lot of time probably having to learn new stuff.
Yeah.
And if you don't enjoy the learning, that's probably a good indication that you're not doing the right thing at that point.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have to do that long enough to gain the experience. Like,
yeah, it's so good because right in the beginning you were talking about why you wanted to join the RAF, as enjoying being fascinated by flying as a kid and all those kind of things. And there is something undeniably cool about fast jet pilot, or I fly fast jets, or I'm involved in fast jets. It's just cool. For me anyway, I'm with you 100% on that.
Yeah.
But the question you've just really well illustrated is, if you want that, do you want to be fast jet pilot because you want to be a fast jet pilot? Or do you want to be a fast jet pilot because it sounds cool to be a fast jet pilot? Because the process you're going to have to go through and the exacting standards you are going to have to hit is going to mean that at times it might not be as fun as you think it is.
Yeah, totally.
There's going to be a lot of effort involved.
Yeah, it is. And like even though you're doing the job you love, like there are definitely times where you're like, this is rubbish. I hate this. It's not like it's all been every day is plain sailing, whistling to work and isn't this great? Like that's just no job does that. There will always be the ups and downs. I sort of think I'd love to be able to play the piano. I think it'd be great to be able to play the piano. It's a lot of effort. Like I'm going to have to do all this extra work, and I've tried a couple of times. Going right, I'll sit there and look at it and go, I need to go and do something quickly. It shows me that whilst I'd like to be able to play the piano really well, I just don't have the motivation to do it. Like, okay, this is just a task that is obviously not actually that important to me, even though I sort of think I really would like to play the piano. And it's the same sort of things. You find yourself going away from it. It's like when I left the Air Force initially, I looked at property investing, because I sort of thought, actually, I can do this. There's all these different strategies and it all looks exciting. I just found that every morning I got up thinking, right, I'm going to crack on. I'm going to do this property thing today. And I just wasn't motivated by it. It's like, well, this is not the role for me. This isn't going to, despite looking at all those, this will give you passive income. Crikey, what an overview that is with property. And this will do this and this will do this. And won't it be, and you see all these, Instagram people on, Facebook groups living these apparently amazing lifestyles. Well, that gives you all this freedom, doesn't it? Yeah, but it doesn't actually, it's not free. It might be freedom for some people. It wasn't freedom for me. And I found very, very quickly that I just kind of went, no, I'm definitely doing something else. It's not going to be that. And I think that's important to recognize within yourself. It's okay to change your ladder, like back to the old analogy, but that's exactly what I did. So actually, that's going to be the wrong wall to climb for me. That is not going to give me the lifestyle, the freedom that, as my definition defines it. I'm not going to want to do this every single day.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I'm conscious of time. I don't want to take up too much more of yours. Thank you so much for all of that, Kevin. I think it's been, one, fascinating, but two, just some really interesting perspectives that I think everybody can take something from, or anybody who is open to it can take something from. Before we go, I'm asking all of my guests this same question. What is something someone can do if they are currently feeling lost or stuck, or are really looking for more freedom, however that is defined?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's about trying to look inside yourself and work out what the answer to that question could be. Because we often sort of think, I want more freedom. Okay, well, what does that mean to you? Like, if it's like when someone's really, really ill, and I've got a good buddy of mine who's incredibly ill. There's only one thing that's important to him that's going to give like future freedom, and that's health again. So I think working out what it is, then most people aren't incredibly ill, but they're like life's busy and around them. I think it's just taking some time to kind of maybe use the 4 quadrants. I don't know, whatever works for you, but maybe it's a framework that might be good. Like, what does freedom mean in each one of these different quadrants? Like, you're going to have your health, because if you don't have a health, don't have anything. It's pointless having £1 million in your pensions and investments and blah, 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 and all this cash set in the bank if you're so incredibly unwell that you can't utilize it. So like health becomes a really important thing. Like, what does that mean? And what does having good health mean? How do you manage like your mental fitness, the mental health side of stuff? And I think just probably sitting down and just giving yourself some time to define what your goals, define your aspirations. Like, what do you really want to do? And then just start the smallest possible step to achieving that. It might be like, my social life actually isn't particularly great because I'm a bloke and I still work relationships and blah, blah. But I know it's important. Like, what's the smallest possible step? Like, just reaching out to and having a chat with one of your old buddies, and then just trying to do it a bit more regularly, for example. I think it's just that. Like, just because most people, I don't think have ever. We often have. One of the first questions is like, what are you trying to achieve? What, within your financial planning side, what is it that's really important to you? What do you value most out of life? And it's rare that people, frankly, are like, yeah, I'm here are my goals and objectives, and that's completely normal. But if we don't even know what we're aiming for, any path is fine, isn't it? Well, take control of your path, I think, and the only way you can do that is by just trying to think and not being so rigidly dogmatic that, once you've picked it, that's it. Like, I cannot stray from the path. Like, of course you can. Life changes all the time. But at least, like, you've got the comfort of knowing the path you're walking down is probably the right one for now.
Yeah.
I reappraise it every few years, and see how that goes. But I think that might be a good starter for 10. I don't know.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I completely agree that understanding why, because I think most of us fall into that. What do you want? You can list the things you want. What are your goals? What are your aspirations? This is this, and this. And then the question is, why? What is that going to give you? I think it's until you get to that deeper meaning that isn't a thing. It isn't something you could buy, or once you get beneath all of that and go, actually, this is going to give me this deeper meaning, or help me create that, then you can go in search of the mechanisms that can create it for you.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Kevin, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed that. Before we go, I know you're not embracing a whole marketing piece in this instance, but if people are interested in what you do, how can they get hold of you if they would like a further conversation with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I've recently started up a Substack blog as well.
What's the name of that?
It's From Fast Jet to Finance.
Okay.
Finance. So it's just sort of musings. I kind of have a think about and write. But yeah, either through LinkedIn. There's a website. You'll find me if you type in my name as well. So.
I think you're the only Kevin Gatland who's an OBE. I think.
Yes, I think so.
So if you're not sure whether it's that Kevin, it is if he's OBE. So LinkedIn, Substack, From Fast Jet to Finance.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Again, I think if you type my name into Google, you'll definitely find me. So
thank you so much, Kevin. I've really enjoyed that. And thank you everybody for listening. If you have enjoyed the episode, please make sure that you like it, share it, subscribe to the podcast. I would be fascinated in any thoughts or comments you have. Best way to get in touch with the podcast is via email, handsupifyou'rehuman@gmail.com. I think that's about it. But thank you so much again, Kevin. Really appreciate the chat. Thank you everybody for listening. And I wish you a peaceful and joyful few days, and I will speak to you soon. Take care.